Buenos días a todos y bienvenidos a este encuentro dedicado a un escritor rumano de origen sefardí, Alexandru Vona. Este año se cumple el centenario de su nacimiento y es algo que al menos hasta ahora ha pasado un poco desapercibido, diría yo, dentro y fuera de Rumanía. Entonces, es la razón por la cual me pareció aún más importante marcarlo de alguna manera nosotros. Me acompañan desde Rumanía en este recuerdo de la figura de Alexandru Vona las doctoras Anca Tudorancea y Grațiela Benga-Țuțuianu. ¿Quién era Alexandru Vona? Para empezar, se trata de un seudónimo, no era su nombre real. Su nombre real, que sonaba muy poco rumano, era Alberto Enrique Samuel Béjar y Mayor. Nació el 3 de marzo de 1922 en Bucarest, en el seno de una familia sefardita ilustre, emparentada al parecer con la del escritor Elias Canetti. El seudónimo Vona es una permutación, digamos, del apellido de su madre, Navon, un anagrama. En casa, la familia de Vona hablaba español. De hecho, él no aprendió rumano hasta que cumplió 9 años, bastante tarde, y tuvo que ir a la escuela. Y desde ya, creo yo, tenemos un rasgo sintomático, simbólico, se podría decir, en este retraso del aprendizaje del rumano. El retraso con el que empieza a expresarse en el idioma en el que escribirá sus libros. Y el otro rasgo definitorio del destino literario de Vona considero que es el opuesto al anterior. El opuesto al retraso, es decir, precisamente la precocidad. Esto se nota ya que con solo 14 años, en 1936, animado y financiado por su abuelo, publica un libro de poesía titulado Versos, un poemario en que su voz aún infantil seduce con su candor y con su compostura. Vona seguirá publicando cuentos y poemas en la revista Fundațiilor Regale de Bucarest y a principios de 1947, justo antes de casarse y de emigrar a Francia, escribe en menos de 3 semanas su única novela, Ferestrele zidite. El mismo año, 1947, recibe también el premio de las fundaciones Fundațiilor Regale pentru scriitori tineri, para escritores jóvenes, por un poemario Vitral y Vidrieras, pero este poemario ya no vería la luz editorial porque con la llegada del comunismo la editorial desapareció. Ferestrele zidite, la novela de Vona, el libro por el que este escritor es conocido hoy comúnmente, tiene traducción al castellano bajo el título Las ventanas cegadas, en la versión de Alberto Conde, pero se trata de una traducción indirecta del francés, todavía carece de traducción directa del rumano. Y hay que decir que este libro, su libro más famoso, ha tenido un destino cabalmente extraño. Para empezar, el trayecto del libro se bifurca con la partida de Vona a París y habrá por un lado un trayecto rumano del libro y por otro lado un trayecto francés. Y ambos trayectos serán muy tropezados, como veremos a continuación. En Rumanía, el escritor Ovidiu Constantinescu, amigo de Vona, y a quien le había confiado el manuscrito de Ferestrele zidite, intentará publicarlo en repetidas ocasiones, pero no será apenas en 1993 que la novela de Vona acaba publicándose. Entonces, tenemos por un lado un libro que tardó menos de 3 semanas en crearse, en escribirse, y que tardó 46 años en ser publicado. Nuevamente, precocidad y retraso. En cuanto al trayecto francés del libro, el gran historiador de las religiones, Mircea Eliade, fue quien se encargó de alguna manera de apadrinar este libro que le había gustado, intentando ayudar a que se publicara en Francia. Lo que pasa es que la defectuosa traducción francesa no acabó convenciendo a los editores, como tampoco lo hicieron algunos desencuentros que Vona juzgaría después como auténticas meteduras de pata de su parte. No fui nada hábil, le comentará a su amiga, la gran crítica literaria rumana Irina Mavrodin, por la que tenemos acceso a una interesante anecdótica respecto a este libro que resumiré a continuación. Por ejemplo, en la editorial Gallimard de París, Vona le dice a Queneau que en Rumanía nadie habría publicado a Isidor Izu, al cual precisamente acababa de publicar Queneau. Y también le dijo que no estaba seguro de publicar un nuevo libro y que no le había dicho que si publicaría un nuevo libro, entonces sí publicaría el primero también. A Gabriel Marcel, quien inicialmente quiso publicar la novela sin haberla leído, simplemente porque confiaba ciegamente en la recomendación de Mircea Eliade, al final le acaba convenciendo el escritor Michel Tournier de que no valía la pena. En palabras del escritor, se trataba du mauvais Proust. En Stock, en otra editorial francesa, le piden pagar la mitad de los gastos de publicación, y en Les Editions de Minuit, Alain Robrier le recomienda volver a traducir el libro. La traducción era ciertamente mejorable, hecha por un traductor demasiado comunista como para respetar el texto. Le recomienda volver a traducirlo si quería que se lo publicara. Y no será más que en 1995 que saldrá este libro en su versión francesa, esta vez en la valiosa traducción de Alain Paruy. Cabe decir también que Vona distó bastante de empujar a toda fuerza a que su libro se publicara en Francia. Todo lo contrario, no, digamos, se esforzó por ser un escritor reconocido en el mundillo literario parisino, sino que vivió toda su vida de su trabajo como ingeniero de construcción, porque él había hecho la Politécnica en Bucarest y varios edificios emblemáticos de Francia fueron construidos por él. Había participado en la construcción de estos edificios o sitios. Por ejemplo, sé que participó en la construcción del aeropuerto de Orly. Pero cuando por fin Las ventanas cegadas, Ferestre les idite, acaba publicada, fue una auténtica revelación. Obtuvo un éxito inmediato, demostrando así la inmunidad del libro a las circunstancias, al desencuentro temporal, a la degradación. Ganó el premio Unión Latina de lenguas romances, fue traducido a varios idiomas, fue muy bien, obtuvo una recepción muy destacada. Y después de este éxito, acabaron viendo la luz editorial otras obras de Alexandru Vona. En total, la obra de Vona constituye un cuerpo más bien reducido y fragmentado, pero no por eso deja de convencer y de seducir a sus lectores. Se empezó a rescatar la obra de Vona más allá de Las ventanas cegadas en la editorial Apostrof. Le debemos a la editora de Apostrof, a Marta Petreu, la recuperación de del resto de la obra de Vona. Empezó publicándole su correspondencia con Ovidiu Constantinescu, el amigo de Vona, que se había encargado de publicar Ferestrele Zidite, sin lograrlo hasta 93, cuando con la ayuda de Ileana Mălăncioiu, la poeta Ileana Mălăncioiu, se acaba publicando. Y aparece primero esta correspondencia en el 97 bajo el nombre Ferestrele întredeschise, las ventanas entreabiertas. Luego Esmeralda en 2003, antes había aparecido Misterioasa dispariție a orașului de Câmpie. Y se recupera de alguna manera el resto de la obra de Vona, empujado, digamos, por Marta Petreu, por la editorial Apostrof. Tenemos, en conclusión, con Alexandru Vona, fallecido el 12 de noviembre de 2004 en París, un destino literario sin duda sui generis, que osciló entre la resistencia del entorno a recibir el texto, por un lado, y la resistencia del texto a pesar de todo. Os invito a leer Las ventanas cegadas, Ferestrele Zidite, y a dejaros envolver por su misterio, por los contornos fluidos y luminosos de una escritura poética y realmente hermosa. Ahora os presentaré a nuestra invitada, la doctora Anca Tudorancea de Bucarest, quien nos enseñará un poco el contexto en el que nació Alexandru Vona, el contexto sefardita de Bucarest. La doctora Anca Tudorancea es investigadora y secretaria científica en el Centro para el Estudio de la Historia de los Judíos en Rumanía y profesora en el Centro de Estudios Judíos de la Universidad de Bucarest. Sus investigaciones se centran en la historia de las comunidades judías de Bucarest y entre sus publicaciones se encuentran los libros Coduri vizuale, Imaginarul Bucureștiului evreiesc, 2013, reeditado en 2021, Istorii și imagini din Bucureștiul evreiesc, 2011, y Personaje și povești din Bucureștiul sefard, 2016, estos dos últimos libros en coautoría con Felicia Waldman. Y el último libro, Personajes e historias del Bucarest sefardita, saldrá el año que viene también en versión castellana. Doctora Tudorancea, muchas gracias por haber aceptado nuestra invitación y le invito a hablarnos a comunicar su ponencia.
Buenos días a todos, gracias por el invito. Yo voy a hablar en inglés. I can understand Spanish very well. I read in Spanish, but I don't speak it for now. Maybe next time. Okay, so I want to show you where the documentation of the Sephardic Bucharest begin, and it began in 19th century with Ángel Pulido Fernández. He was, just a moment to share the screen. Okay. This is Ángel Pulido Fernández. Everyone can see the presentation? Okay. He was a very important senator, and he was a Philosemite. And he wrote 2 books in Spanish, very important in Spain, also abroad. And they are Los Israelitas Españoles y el idioma castellano, and Españoles sin patria y la raza sefardí. very important books, but in Romania they are hard to find. Even in the Romanian Academy Library, you cannot find an exemplary of the book. It's a very classic book about Sephardic diaspora. It talks not only about Bucharest, but Sephardis from different towns, from Sarajevo, Thessaloniki, Timișoara, and so on. And it's very well known and studied abroad. Even in California, they have a digital database where they put one of the books. And I found the original one in a digital base in Castilla, and the other one in the digital base of California University. And even in Spain, there is a project to study the books and every personage in the book. It's called Sephardi Web, if you know. It's a recent project, and you can find every person, every photo they sent, every letter they sent, because some of the correspondent sent several letters, and everybody talks about their community, their town, their main institutions, like the school, the synagogues, how many they are, how are the relation with the authorities, and so on. And also, Ángel Pulido Fernández, I know this is very well known in Spain, is the man behind the idea to get the Spanish citizenship back to Sephardic, back to Sephardim, as a recognition of a historical thought of Spain. Moreover, he in the Senate, he was a lawyer for this. For the Sephardic people, saying they are really, truly Spanish patriots. They know very well Spain. They have Spanish names, Spanish food, Spanish feelings. And for this reason, when I translated some of the letters for the first time for the book you mentioned, I named this chapter of the book Mi querida y dulce España, because most of the letters speak about Spain without knowing Spain, speak about the flowers and smells from Spain, and nobody from generations have seen Spain. So it's a very, very melancholic and very poetic memories from generation to generation passed on. And it's a very, it was very interesting for Fernández to meet Bejarano. And this meeting is mentioned in one of the book that Bejarano, Jaime Bejarano, was the main inspiration for the books and the inspiration for this idea to get the citizenship back to the Sephardim. And why? In this place they meet, and Bejarano really impressed him because he spoke very, very well Spanish, and not only him, also his family. And at the time he was the great rabbi of the Sephardic community in Bucharest, and also the headmaster of the boys' school in Bucharest. And he was in this position for 42 years. After that, he became the rabbi of Adrianople, and from 1920, he was the great rabbi of Turkey. So he was a really great personality. And from all these languages he spoke really well. Also, he speak Arabic and other dozen languages. He really adored Spanish. Even Fernandez published one of the poems Bejarano has written about Spanish, saying a ti lengua santa, a ti te adoro, más que a toda plata, más que a toda oro. Tú sos la más linda de todo lenguaje, a ti dan la ciencia, todo el bandaje, and so on. And this was a poem he saw inside the school for boys of the community. And what he's saying, Bejarano, what he's saying to Fernandez is that the Jews, they are really devoted to Spain through the names they are using, through the names they are given to the synagogues. Even the synagogues in Bucharest, they are Cajal Grande and Cajal Chico, for example. But also the name of Bejarano, he is from Bejar originally. But what he's saying about the Spanish language is the Spanish is the language in which it is said that God speaks to the angels. So it's a completely love declaration of all the correspondence from the books. And this is in the late time of the life, the period from Turkey. And you can see at his funeral, it has said it was a very, very big event, and all the people, not only Jews, but also Muslim and Christians paid respect, and much of the shops were closed. And it was a very good man, and it was also, it has a very good memory. From the books of Fernandez, we have this photo of the school of the boys' school from Sephardic community, and this is the only photo we have. Because of Fernandez, we have the photos of this photo of the exterior of the school, and also on the side it's written in Hebrew the name of the school. But and it's documented. This is the oldest school in Bucharest, and also the Sephardic Jewish community was the oldest Jewish community in Bucharest, documented from 1740 by the authorities, which is the year of the first building of the school. And this is another correspondent. The name is Lazar Asher, and he's one of the head of the committee of the school, and also very good in finance. And many people from these committees, school committees and synagogue committees, were very wealthy also, and they did charities. So where were these Sephardic people living? Because what you see today, and even working for this book about Sephardic Bucharest, and this is the first one about Sephardic Bucharest, it was very hard. Everything in the area was demolished, and the community disappeared. The Sephardim disappeared, and we are talking today of only 10 people in Bucharest, and we don't have a community from 1948, and the community was for administrative reason was merged in the big community. And in communist time, the community had schools in Yiddish, but not in Ladino. And Ladino disappeared, and the people knowing Ladino disappeared, and many of young people, they emigrated to Israel, they made Aliyah. And after demolitions, everything disappeared physically, but also the memories disappeared. And it was a very big research topic to try to get every piece of memory of Sephardim. And even we use publicity ads and every picture we can find. This is a section of the map of Papazoglu, the section of the main Jewish area. And you can see here up, you have the Koral Temple. You can see even today. This is the Ashkenazim synagogue temple. You see here is the Sfânta Viner, Saint Wednesday church, also demolished during communism, but it's an Orthodox church. Here is the Grey Synagogue, the Polish synagogue, also Ashkenazim, and here you can find the Sephardic quarter. And you can see we have this name of the street still Holocaust. It's the street Israelita and the Spanish street. And this is the Spanish street because of the Spanish Jews. And here is Negru Vodă, and the name of the streets, it still exists, but not the street. And you can see the main synagogues here, Havra and another Havra, and in fact this is Kahal Grande and this is Kahal Chicu. And the most important names from this in fact is the small neighborhood of the Sephardim. And in the first years of the ensettlement, this was completely out of the city. It was outside of the city. And today we can see this is the center of the city. Unirea Square is the center of the city, and everybody is asking why the Jews are in the center. Because the center changed, because the city grew. And what is here is completely demolished today. And we are talking, everything here is under a really communist shop, Unirea shop. If you go to Unirea shop to H&M, you can find under, it has historic Sephardic history. Even when I'm in this shop, I always hear tourists from Israel, and I always joke it's because of the ancestor. They came here to shop because of the Jewish history that is demolished and under. But you can see better here the names. And the most important people were Halfon and Hillel. And they had different branches in the genealogical history, people contributing to Romanian economy, Romanian National Bank. Also, they had donations for the Romanian Academy, fellowships for young students, and so on. And everything starting to change from the 20th century, and they don't have only the small neighborhood, they begin to extend to different other sections of the city. And also the buildings, the religious buildings evolve. You can see from the very small and very simple buildings. For example, Kahal Grande was rebuilt in 1891 by an Armenian architect, Grigore Cherkez. and it was a very beautiful synagogue. You can see exterior, interior, and also they have this idea of bringing concert, opera concert. It was said to be the conservatorium of the community. But unfortunately, it's a symbol of the Holocaust. It was burned down during the Bucharest pogrom, and it's the very definition of Holocaust sacrifice by burning. And for people from the Sephardic community, these kind of photos are really, really painful, and there are a lot of them. Other buildings I can show you. This is the palace of the community. They put a lot of effort into for constructing this kind of building, and in 1930 they were supposed to have a big celebration of 200 year of existence of the community, and because of the building they don't have the money to celebrate in 1913, and they celebrate 1 year after this. So, but the sad story behind this palace that is also demolished is that it was during the Holocaust. It was converted into in martial court, also for different Jews, and people were sentenced to death in this palace. Also, I want to show you other disappeared building is Cahal Chicu. It was very close to Cahal Grande, and it was the last to be demolished. And I was told you before about the Grey Synagogue of Ashkenazim. After the demolition of Cahal Chicu, people from the Grey Synagogue, the Polish synagogue, were granting Sephardim a place to worship. And because of that, and the intervention of Spanish ambassador and Israeli ambassador and American ambassador in 1986, they saved the great Polish synagogue, because it was a place for Sephardim to pray. And because of that, a small portion of buildings and synagogues still exists, because Ceausescu wanted to demolish everything, to have everything, even the Coral Temple, it was supposed to be demolished. And because of the memory of Sephardim, we managed to save another synagogue. And also, this was during the Holocaust was devastated. And you can see this. This is the latest map of Bucharest. You can see on black synagogues disappeared, synagogues demolished. It was also the same for churches. Many of the churches disappeared, were demolished because religion was targeted. But today we have many research topics about demolished churches, and not so many about demolished synagogues. And this happened also in all of the country, even in Timișoara and in Iași and in different cities, because they wanted to rebuild cities, that the cities were supposed to be for the new man, the communist man without history. They thought history is very very smelly, very not, they couldn't have too much people in these bourgeoisie houses. And they want to build blocks after blocks after blocks. And if this is a soft prison where everybody knows everybody, everyone knows, and they can watch the neighbor. and they change from the garden city to the prison city. This is the where were the Sephardim? And you can see this is the place where the school for boys of the Sephardi community had to be, but even the memory is not there. This is only the name of the street remains, Negru Vodă, if you remember from the first map. This is the place where the palace of the community had to be. And this is the famous view of the Unirii Mall, where Cajale Grande and Cajale Chico were supposed to be. And nobody remembers them. And this is a really interesting entrance from Negru Vodă to the Museum of the Community, which is also a synagogue, and also is a part of the history during the communism that this synagogue saved half of the street from demolition. And quickly, I want to show you the resistant aisle of buildings of modernism and 19th century buildings that remain, and these are my favorites. Even this, I think, even is a modernist building. I think it has a little bit of Spain inside. And it's important to say that because of the closeness between the communities, some of the Moorish influence in ornamentation, they remain in the Holy Union Temple, which is the museum of the community today. And also the Coral Temple has Moorish ornamentation. So something remains of the memories of the neighbors, the Jewish neighbors. I thank you. Sorry for that.
Thank you very much, Anca Tudorancea. It was a pleasure to have you here, and it was an amazing walk through this ghost Bucharest, through this territory of absence. A beautiful and very sad walk, and very adequate prelude to Alexandru Vona's work, literature, because it's also a territory of absence. Y ahora pasamos a la ponencia de la doctora Grațiela Benga, perdón. Grațiela Benga-Țuțuianu es investigadora científica en el Instituto Titu Maiorescu, filial de Timișoara, de la Academia Rumana, y profesora asociada en la Universidad de Timișoara. Es autora de varios libros, mencionaré solo dos de ellos, por ejemplo, Traversarea cercului, centralitate inițiere mit în opera lui Mircea, de un libro de 2016, y también Rețeaua, poezia românească a anilor 2000. También publicó múltiples estudios y artículos sobre la literatura rumana contemporánea, sobre la historia literaria rumana, la literatura del exilio y la literatura de la Europa central y del este. La profesora Grațiela Benga nos adentrará en el mundo de Alexandru Vona. Vă rog.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm glad to meet you today and to speak about Alexandru Vona, a writer who, in my opinion, embodied a connection, another connection between Spain and Romania. I will talk about trauma, boundaries, and reality and non-reality in Alexandru Vona's novel, The Bricked Up Windows, Ferestrele zidite. Well, over the years, Vona recalled the bizarre transformation that had occurred in his state of consciousness in the 3 weeks that he had needed to write The Bricked Up Windows. You may have a look at his confession. You have it on the first slide. For Alexandru Vona, writing was a form of wandering and a way of knowing, in which the labors of identity and the metamorphosis of consciousness occupied the central place. My speech aims to call attention to a prose of contrasts and confluences between memory and the present, between lucidity and irrationality, by the manner in which it metabolizes trauma, turns phantasms into a hybrid reality, and reflects mutations on several levels and in identity, social, aesthetic levels. The bricked up windows goes beyond the paradigm of polarities. The novel belongs to an area of indeterminacy. There is only one proper name, a female name, Kati. Only one proper name in the entire narrative. But this definite insertion does not affect the ambiguity of the text in any way. A small Romanian provincial town, loosely identifiable by its Gothic architecture and Austro-Hungarian institutions, vaguely portrayed characters. I mean, a barber, a tailor, a neighbor, a friend, or an army comrade, a stranger in a black dress, or a few relatives. A barely distinguishable historical period, probably the years before the First World War, and a narrative voice that might be that of a lieutenant. These are the elements around which a memorable atmosphere is created. Why did I say memorable? Because it is ambiguous, it is hypnotic, it is mythical, it is residual, it is real and unreal at the same time. Consequently, an author who is familiar by descent with the marginal condition reconstitutes a marginal part of the world, explores the mechanisms of isolation, probes the limits of consciousness, and investigates the poles of identity as defined by Paul Ricoeur. The transition from contemplation to analysis, the technique of disintegration and recomposition generate the questions, what am I and who am I, throughout the novel, but without providing a plain answer to them. One cannot distinguish a clear, epic core in Vona's novel. The narrator withdraws from the conversations. He runs away from an insistent neighbor, for example. He meets Kati only from time to time, but he is fascinated by a stranger, a female stranger in a black dress, and confronts her possible relatives. We don't know for sure. Well, like a detective, the protagonist finds out that the young woman was hiding a drama. Those who accompany her remain stubbornly silent, and the note the narrator receives deepens the mystery instead of unraveling it. The note remains unread, because the world of objects does not arouse the narrator's interest. Ontologically and aesthetically, the real phantasmatic illustration of nothingness is detectable in the inner layers of the self, but also in the language. decomposing into panic and isolation attacks. The state of being becomes synonymous with the vulnerable man, the man who is frightened by the forms that can be integrated within reality. Consequently, the substance of the novel does not lie in the barely outlined plot or in the vague characters who are merely conventional figures encountered in a manner that exposes the brutal forms of intersection or mutual dissolution. It is something else that makes the narrative intense and appealing. On the one hand, the overwhelming sadness of the narrator, as if every moment were eroded by silent tragedies and trauma. On the other hand, the chronotope that in the bricked up windows turns the ridiculous into the unusual and memory into phantasm. The hazily profiled Transylvanian city, possibly Brașov, but we cannot be sure, preserves traces of the past. A once great castle is now fallen into ruin, just as the daily life is overwhelmed by anguish and absurdity. Time itself becomes a character in Vona's novel, but a character without a face, without deviations. It keeps grinding shapes and erasing identities. The narrator is unable to find a single photograph or portrait when he looks for them in a room. And this is an important detail I will talk about for a while. An emanation of the real past, as Roland Barthes defines a photograph. The absence of the pictures in the bricked up windows releases multiple time dimensions, which grow within the chronological time, transforming it. Syntagmatically, the novel reveals a way of understanding the time in which the narrator thinks he lives in. Paradigmatically, it displays metamorphoses with irrefutable lucidity. Ontologically, it decodes the failure of adapting to a settlement that has lost its ability to build bridges between human beings. Bertrand Westphal identified the mechanisms by which fiction enters into a relationship of mimesis with the world, and he explained how it comes to contain the derivatives of the real. A concept that includes the universe, space, but also time. Space, most important, is shaken in Vona's novel, a phenomenon synchronous with the disintegration of the chronotope, reflected in the European novel after 1945. Between the shattered exterior and the vulnerable interior lies a symbolic and narrative fabric, if I may say so, a fabric on which a different phase of continuity and discontinuity is printed. By searching the mind, objective geography reveals unexpected resources and finds its counterpart in what Jean-Jacques Bunin-Buget would call the narrator's inner map, the only one that is genuine, essential, and significant. The balance of power changes, and the inner order disorder is projected outward, destructuring the world according to the sources of memory, according to the course of lucidity, according to the thrill of emotion and the energy of the self. Unlike Balzac's Paris, a city in which social topography revealed a structured space, mapped by Pierre Bourdieu later, or Franco Moretti, the spatial development in Vona's fiction does not form axes. It offers only a few elusive points of convergence that do not go beyond the surface. We have the street, we have a barber shop, we have the cafe, the house and the doors. We have the stairs and we have the post office. All these are the coordinates of a space of shadows and explorations reflecting what? Reflecting the narrator's examination of his own conscience. In Vona's novel, the city does not have areas pinned in a hierarchy. The landscape and the urban architecture disclose their invasive aggression, as conscious itself is aggressed and violated in a prolonged analytical exercise. Briefly, both the walks the narrator takes and his immobility lay out a counterpath that invalidates the idea of action, including the mapping of an urban geography. The only relevant map is that of the stream of thoughts, images, memories, phantasms, emotions that define the character. The objective existence is disturbed by the insertion of spaces of crisis, which allow the recognition of defining outlines in the topography of memory. Why do I say that? Because the peripheral city has a barely sketched geography. It is a heterotopic space in which the only markings are the thresholds and the passage areas, the window, the balcony, the door, for example. Well, this geography influences the stylistic register of narrative due to the large number of tropes, especially epithets and metaphors. On the other hand, just a second, because I need another slide here. On the other hand, I said the marginal areas where the settlement is misleading evoke the limit between margin and border. I remind you that Julien Gracq highlighted in a very interesting way the shades that separate margins and borders. The novel shows how everything can be incorporated while giving up everything at the same time. The narrator mentally devours reality and at the same time, he allows himself to be consumed by the reality of his consciousness. He sees the world. And he also sees himself exploring the world, embracing it, confronting it, or being devoured by the universe itself. The framework, metaphor, function of the bricked up windows is closely related to the denial of the status of mediator object. We have an implicit duality here, an implicit duality of the window, privacy, and denial of privacy. And this duality was brought to light by Jean Baudrillard. But Vona's novel highlights the failure of transparency without transition. Seeing without touching gives only the illusion of connection. And what is interesting in Vona's novel is the fact that we have no touching at all. The use of thresholds determines the particularization of the messianic function in Vona's novel. The messianic operates within the identity division and the suspension of coherent history. I remember that Giorgio Agamben, an Italian philosopher, explains that the messianic is not the end of time, but the time of the end. The postponement and the state of exception that define the narrator include him in the gallery of the spectral characters, for whom the suspension of history conditions the messianic restitution of the past. In this novel, the ethos of expectation balances the search, and it is a search that brings Vona's novel somewhat closer to Robert Musil's The Man Without Qualities. In a nutshell, in order to understand the hard times that we live today, we must understand the times lived by people who experienced both utopia and apocalypse. As you all know, literature is a mirror. As I tried to show you briefly, Vona's novel deserves to be recognized as belonging to the powerful prose of the 20th century, because it mirrors the magnetism of mutually determined contradictions, an attribute of the spirit that animates the Central European novel. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, doctora Grațiela Benga, por este hermoso paseo por el universo de Alexandru Vona. Hemos tenido dos geografías de la sombra, dos geografías de alguna manera fantasmales, la geografía que nos enseñó la doctora Anca Tudorancea del Bucarest judío, del Bucarest sefardita, con edificios que existían cuando pasaba por ahí Alexandru Vona, pero que dejaron de existir después. Edificios borrados de la faz de la tierra, al igual que se borran los contornos en el espacio literario de Vona, siempre en trance de perderse, de desaparecer, de volver a construirse. Y me alegro mucho de haber hecho este encuentro homenaje a Alexandru Vona y que lo conozca más gente aquí y tal vez que empiece a leerse más y a estudiarse mucho más. Ahora, si hay alguien que quisiera hacer una pregunta, por favor. ¿Alguien? Questions? ¿Întrebări?
A ver, pregunten si no, pero agradecer, bueno, la explicación y el tiempo dedicado. Ha sido interesante. Yo no conocía nada, en plan, sí que me había informado un poquillo, pero sí que antes nunca había escuchado hablar de estos autores. Pero bueno, me ha parecido interesante y bueno, que es algo que mira, que hay que dar a conocer.
Sí, gracias, Jaume. Damos por acabado este encuentro dedicado a Alexandru Vona. Agradezco en primer lugar a nuestras invitadas la generosa participación en este encuentro y os agradezco a todos, alumnos, colegas, etcétera, vuestra presencia aquí. Muchas gracias. Hasta luego. La revedere.